A warm welcome, everyone. Here we are gathered together for the Sunday Sounds of Dhamma. And, ajá, hay interpretación simultánea en español, gracias a Claudia. Y Claudia, tienes el micrófono apagado, ¿no? Okay, beautiful. So nice to see you all gathered here. And as usual for Sunday Sounds of Dhamma, we will have about a half an hour of meditation, guided meditation, about half an hour of Dhamma talk, and then plenty of time for questions, comments, reflections. Just to do a couple of announcements before we get started. We have Stephen's class coming up. Stephen's going to do some talks on Tuesday nights. And that's a drop-in, no need to register, you can just show up starting next month. And registration is still open for the November retreat up in Massachusetts at Berry Center. Going to look at Buddhist art and how Buddhist art depicts different emotions and feelings that we have on the path of practice. So that'll be fun and hopefully informative and a beautiful, peaceful abiding up there. Hi, welcome back. And yeah, many other things happening. We have also Death Tea Room coming up in connection with Dia de los Muertos and Halloween. So have a look at the website and you can see what's there. But for now, we'll go ahead and get started with our guided meditation. And today, I would like to offer just a meditation on mindfulness of body, because I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a few moments. And so it's really an opportunity for you to experience the way that you know the world through your body. Okay, that's the lens that I want to offer for right now. So we'll go ahead and get started. The heavy breathers in the room will settle down in just a moment. And you can begin just by adjusting your posture, trying to find that balanced and upright and relaxed position where the bones of the spine can carry the weight of the body. And perhaps the muscles can relax and widen and soften. Relaxing the belly. And really allowing the body to settle here in this place, in this time. Sensing the legs and the feet and the natural stability of the body. Moving the attention up the torso and perhaps releasing tension around the chest or the back, leaving plenty of room for this open-hearted practice. Sensing the arms and the hands. Just aware of where they are. Any sensations you find there. And awareness also coming up the neck and the head. Perhaps softening the eyes. And relaxing the mouth. And at this point, just checking in with the question, how do you know there is a body? What are the sensations? And you might particularly notice what kinds of sensations are coming into awareness. Sensations of touch or sensations of sound, sensations of heat, movement, smell, light, even taste. What's happening right now? And having been mindful of the body for some time now, you might rest the attention on one part of the body. Just rest the attention in one place. Any place that feels easy, it's fine. Beautiful. So that brings us to the end of the meditation. And now we'll transition to the Dhamma talk. Yeah. See if I can share. As usual, we'll begin with the homage to the Triple Gem. And what that means is that this says honor to or respect to the Blessed One, the fully enlightened one, the fully enlightened one. It's a little bit of a repetitive phrase there. So you say that 3 times, referring to the Buddha, the historical person from India many, many centuries ago, as well as just the quality of awakening itself, or the capacity, you could say the human capacity for awakening. And then that last line, Buddha, again, referring to that. Dhamma is the teachings, and also the reality to which those teachings are pointing. And Sangha, the great, vast, and varied group of folks who are practicing these teachings in various ways. So you can feel free to chant along. Everyone online, please make sure your mics are muted. And if you prefer, you can also just let it wash over you. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. As some of you know, last weekend I was co-leading a workshop, a short retreat, if you will, on mindfulness of feeling tones and mindfulness of mind, together with my friend, Venerable Ananda Bodhi, with whom I lived for a number of years when I was training in the Theravada, actually. And that was beautiful to be co-leading with Ananda Bodhi again. Thanks to Bhikkhu Bodhi, who invited us to do that. But it also had brought me a little bit back into this teaching of the Satipatthana, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And we had also touched on that a little bit during the beginning of the fundamentals course. But so I just wanted to really spend a few weeks actually investigating this particular sutta a bit more. And it's not usually something that I teach, mostly because Satipatthana is a very, it's a longer sutta, and it's very dense with a lot of different modalities of practice. And so it takes a little while to address it. And so we're going to take a little while and just touch on it still, but maybe over the course of 3 or 4 weeks. And the reason to do that is in part because the Satipatthana, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, is one of the key frameworks of practice that we see in early Buddhism. It's considered to be one of the most important suttas. It is a sutta that is very, very frequently used as a basis for understanding how to work with different experiences that we might have. And so I think it's good for us to have a sense of that and a little bit of knowledge about what's in it. And so I am working from Middle Length Discourse number 10, the Satipatthana Sutta, and Majjhima Nikaya 10, for those of you who are familiar with the Pali. And again, yes, so this title, sati, is mindfulness, and patthana can be understood one of 2 ways. It can be understood as upatthana, which means to establish or to develop, or patthana as a foundation or a basis. And we'll see why in just a moment. But basically, I just want to go over the very beginning of this teaching because it gives us already a very beautiful and very, I think, hopeful view of the path. It's kind of one of the places where we see the Buddha very emphatically state his confidence in our ability to practice this path all the way to its culmination. So the sutta begins with, "Thus have I heard." That's Venerable Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, saying that when he was reciting the teachings. And the Buddha was in the Kuru country. There's an interesting commentary around that the Buddha gave many very profound teachings in the Kuru country, but he considered those folks to be able to receive some of the most profound teachings that he delivered. And so there he was, and he addressed the monastics thus. He said, monastics, and interestingly, we can understand that he is actually speaking to the monastics. Later on, he says, "A bhikkhu abides," but we understand that to mean a committed practitioner abides or practices in this way. Indeed, the commentaries actually state that specifically. So I offer that because I think that is a confusion that some people have, that you read the suttas and it says a bhikkhu does this or a bhikkhuni does that, and that you think it applies only really to people who are ordained or people who live in a monastery or people who have been practicing, their whole lives. But in fact, what it means is someone who is applying themselves to this practice. That's all it means, really fully engaging with this practice. So he says right at the very outset, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for overcoming sorrow and lamentation, for the ending of pain and grief, for the attainment of the way, for the realization of nibbana. What is that direct path? The 4 foundations of mindfulness. So right away, he gives this very affirmative statement. And And for a long time, when I would hear this language of the purification of beings, I really disliked that. I was like, no, that makes us all sound like we're kind of dirty and then we need to be purified, right? But actually, what that phrase means is not anything about dirt. What it means is something about this, and this is why it's then further described as this letting go of pain and grief and letting go of sorrow. This, what purification means in early Buddhism, it means a release of the things that stand in the way of bliss and clarity. That's really what purification of the mind means. So, and this ekayana is the Pali for direct path. Different people have taught it different ways over the centuries. Some people said it was the only path. That's what that phrase meant. But actually, you don't see support for that. On the contrary, in the suttas, you see the Buddha describe many, many paths to awakening, many, many different ways, in accord with his understanding that we all have different bodies and minds. We all have different tendencies, different problems that we run into. So he offered a lot of different ways for people to approach the path of awakening. But this phrase direct path, so this is how Bhikkhu Bodhi, I'm using Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations with a little bit of my own adjustments there. And he uses this phrase direct path which is more in line, you could say, with what I think is a more contextual understanding, which is that it's the path that goes directly to awakening. It doesn't veer off into other things. And you could contrast that with other types of practice, other types of path, where it could not go all the way, actually. And the Buddha says that very clearly in his teachings in other suttas. So this path is described as a path that is going to Nibbana, going all the way to Nibbana. And these four foundations of mindfulness are body, feeling tones, mind, and dhammas. Dhammas we could translate, generally speaking, as like qualities, for example. And the Buddha doesn't really define mindfulness here, right? He doesn't really tell us what that is. And again, we can tell contextually, though, that mindfulness means this form of attention in the present moment, a receptive attention in the present moment. And we'll see why in just a moment. But this idea, this very, very profound and yet simple idea that our ability to be present with our bodies and our minds is enough to wake up. That's the beginning of this sutta, and basically he then elaborates more specifically how. And it calls to mind, I was thinking about, I like to, because I like to tell stories a little bit in terms of both relatable experience, but also sometimes as an example of what we're talking about. And I was thinking about what would be a good example of this. So I'll tell you a little story about when I was training in Japan. So some of you know that I lived in Japan for just under 2 years. I did 4 practice periods with my root teacher, my ordination teacher, Sekihara Roshi. And the first one as a layperson, and then 3 more practice periods as an ordained nun. And so I was there, and monk who was the translator was this German monk whose Dharma name is Shodo. And so we call everybody san, Shodo-san, or, Nagak-san, and so on, right? That's the polite way to say it. It's like ma'am or miss. So Shodo-san was not only the interpreter, but he was also the head of the garden, the vegetable garden specifically, right? So we had this patch of land, roughly the size of the living room here in the vihara, maybe a little bit more, that gave us, a good, maybe probably 45% of our food in the winter and 60% of our food in the summer. It was really, really very, very productive little plot of land. And anyway, Shodo was responsible for the garden. So every once in a while, we'd all go out there and help him with various tasks. And so we were all out there in the garden, as we do, because this is Zen, so people all work together in groups oftentimes. And so I was assigned to pick tea for the roshi. There's a big chamomile bush there, beautiful German chamomile. So it's a bush, roughly as tall as me, seated, and hundreds of tiny, tiny, tiny little white flowers with yellow centers on the bush. And I was to sit down and just pick as many of these as possible in the allotted time. Okay, great. So they give me a little tiny Japanese style stool and I sit down on my little tiny stool and I start to pick and I think, oh, but wait a minute, I don't know what I'm doing here, right? Am I supposed to pick the buds? Am I only supposed to pick the flowers? Is it okay if one or two of the petals has started to fall off? Because in Japan, the instructions are often very, very specific, right? If you are on kitchen practice and they say, cut this carrot like matchstick size, they literally put a matchstick in front of you. Here, do it like this. And they are to look like that, So I thought, well, I better ask Shodo for some more instructions. So I turn to Shodo-san and I say, Shodo-san, I don't know what I'm doing here. Which flowers am I supposed to pick for the tea? Is it okay to pick the buds and so on? So I ask him all these questions. And what does Shodo-san do? He gives me a scowl and he says, are you asking me when a flower becomes a flower? And I pause for a moment. And I say, well, maybe. Yes. He just scowls even more and shakes his head and refuses to answer my question. Just refuses to answer the question. And it was a wonderful, wonderful moment, right? Because without saying anything, what Shodo-san was saying was, you can tell. Use this body and mind and just know. You don't need instructions. Right? So in Zen, we wouldn't use the word mindfulness. It's generally that's not the way that we talk about our practice. But we do talk about attention in the present moment all the time. And so that's what this was about, right? Be present. Be present, and that will help you to know. So in a beautiful way, it's also saying something about the ineffability of life, though. And I don't know that Shodo really intended it that way. But over the years, it's also something like that, right? That we know what we experience. We can know very specifically what we're experiencing and what's in front of us. But the flower is ineffable. The flower is a thing that is changing moment by moment. That's why our practice is to be with it. That's why our practice is to be with this body and mind, because it too is changing moment by moment. Absolutely revealing both the raw facts of life and the ineffability, the mystery of it. Beautiful, beautiful. Mm. And so the Buddha did that for us. He started from that point, all those thousands of years earlier, right? Know this body, because this body is doing exactly that. It will reveal everything you need to know. Mm. And so the Buddha says in this sutta at the very beginning here, he says, so one abides, a committed practitioner abides. So that's an important point. This word abiding, or sometimes it's translated as dwelling. Viharati is the Pali verb. And so that's the Buddha saying that's where our home base is. This should become your home base. Mindfulness should become this where you dwell, where you abide. Right? This is not a practice that you only do on Sundays. It's where you live. So one abides contemplating the body, or you could say understanding the body, taking in the body, and then he uses these three adjectives: ardent, fully aware, and mindful. So ardent is related to, the Pali word is atapi. It's related to the word, a word that has its roots in this kind of yogic practice of working with the heat, elevating the heat of the body. So Bhikkhu Bodhi felt, kind of lined it up beautifully with English, this word ardent. But what does it mean? It means like being fired up about your practice. Right? Being fired up about your practice. This is not a passive activity. This is something to be really fully engaged in. And then this word, fully aware. Yeah, you could say also fully knowing is a good way to literally translate the Pali there. Fully knowing or fully understanding. So this sense of the completeness of really staying with it. And mindful. Right? And then this last bit, so these are the conditions, these are the supporting conditions, right? Starting out this way. And then you have the last supporting condition is having put away covetousness and grief for the world. Mm-hmm. Wow, so that's a big ask right there, right? So what is covetousness? Is wanting, desire, right? And grief, sadness, despair for the world, for the whole world. This kind of two sides of the coin, right? Of this wanting, 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 or pushing away, pushing away. So it's not to say that we have to be perfectly equanimous in order to begin our practice. I think that would be a mistake, right? That's not the request, then it would be impossible. Right? But it is to say that one activity or one intention that you can set that will help to support mindfulness is this settling down where you are. settling down where you are, and to the extent that you can, letting go of grasping and wanting it to be something else, wanting something else to be here, wanting something else to be away. So folks who are here in the vihara today, I will say, we have a new guest. Thanks to my family, the vihara has adopted a golden retriever. His name is Charlie. He's a dear sweetheart. He's over there behind the baby gate. And he's very excited. So he's been doing a little bit of panting today. So he's like that friend in the retreat who breathes really heavy, right? Right? It's just today because he's a little bit excited. It's his first time having so many visitors over to the house. But he's been a very good boy. But in any event, I will say that it's like that, right? You could receive that in the same way that you receive the sound of the refrigerator coming on and off, or the sound of the crow, or the sound of traffic, or the sound of Nino making a meow. And maybe not, right? We have all sorts of different preferences and feelings about the thing. And the practice asks you to just let that be. Okay, it's like this. And I'm not going to let myself be so pushed and pulled around by that I can't practice mindfully, that I can't practice attending to what's happening in body and mind. Yeah. Reminds me also of there's a very famous teacher in Thailand whose monastery is like at the intersection of two streets. So there's a constant stream of vendors and people calling out and traffic and horns honking and whatever. And that's just how it is. He's just like, he doesn't even talk about it. He's just like, that's how it is. You will practice with what's here. That's what other choice do we have but to practice with what's here? So the Buddha tells us these various conditions that we can bring into play, if you will, various conditions that we can use to support ourselves, to support our mindful attention to our bodily experience and to our experience of mind as well. And we're going to talk I'll talk a little bit more about feeling tones, mind, and dhammas over the next few weeks. But just to say, then he begins with this idea of contemplating the body as a body. And that is sometimes just condensed down to just contemplating the body or understanding the body with mindfulness. But I think that Bhante Bhikkhu Bodhi mentions this in his footnote, which is that he likes to use that quite literal translation again as a way of saying, just focusing on the bodily experience in this step, not necessarily the feeling tones associated with that bodily experience or the identification of I am this kind of a person or any kind of qualities, spiritual qualities that you might be trying to feel in your body. It's just knowing the body and really learning, and this is a very important attribute, and we see this again and again, sometimes implicitly and sometimes very explicitly, that part of the reason why we call practice a training is because you are learning to point your attention at particular types of phenomena. So first we're going to look at this thing, and then we're going to look at that thing, and then we're going to look at some of these, and then we're going to look at some of those. And learning, training the mind to be willing to do that is very, very important. It's very, very important because what it leads to is it leads to a kind of malleability. It leads to a kind of workability of the mind, that the mind isn't flowing and streaming with such force, right? Like the white water all the time, that you have a hard time seeing to the bottom. You have a hard time finding the clarity. Okay? So the body, starting with the body, he says, he starts out with one goes to the forest or the root of a tree or an empty hut and sits down. So those are what the Buddha is describing as quiet places of his time, right? The forest or the root of a tree or an empty hut. I would say find your own quiet place in your world, wherever that happens to be. A little bit quiet, right? Because again, think about the forest. What kind of sounds are in the forest? Indeed, there's a whole sutta of the Buddha saying how he had to learn how to deal with terror at the sounds of tigers in the forest. So no matter where you go, there will be stimulus. There will be different phenomena to work with. But find a place that's supportive for you and sit down. Okay, done. He says you could fold your legs crosswise and sit upright. Okay. Some people don't sit with their legs folded. That's really okay. Chairs are fine. Benches are fine. For various reasons, some people sometimes meditate lying down. That's also really fine. You know, attend to your body in such a way that it supports your attention. Right? If you're so overwhelmed with the discomfort of your body, then it becomes difficult just to stay seated or just to stay in whatever your position is for even short periods of time. So know that ultimate comfort is not the goal, nor is it possible, but some degree of comfort such that it fosters this, again, stability of mindfulness, stability of awareness. And then establishing mindfulness in front of him. That's also an interesting one. Establishing mindfulness in front of you. Sometimes this is taken literally to mean, like in Zen, for example, to mean, you know, you kind of lower your eyes and you feel like you're establishing your mindfulness at some distance from you. Other folks have interpreted this to mean like at the front of the face. Again, a kind of fairly literal interpretation. But for me, what it means is actually, I don't take such a literal translation as what Bhante would do here. For me, it means mindfulness at the forefront of the mind. Mindfulness is at the forefront of your attention. Okay, so now I'm using my attention in this way, and mindfulness in front of me means it's the thing that I'm allowing to be at the front of my awareness, if you will. Okay? And then one breathes in and breathes out and knows I'm breathing in long or I'm breathing out long. I'm breathing out in short. I'm breathing out short. And just understands that, just knows that. So it's not a kind of yogic practice where we're trying to make the breath be in a specific shape or a specific length or holding the breath at all. It's not any of those things. It is really allowing the natural rhythms of the breath to come and go and observing those and just knowing them. Very, very, very simple, not always easy, right? Because what happens is we get distracted, all sorts of other phenomena happen. It's fine, you come back to the breath. Many of you have already experienced that one tool that I like to offer when you're doing a mindfulness of breathing practice is to pay attention to the pauses, right? So there may not be a pause. You may be breathing so hard that there isn't a pause, but if there is a pause between the breaths, you can be aware of it, even tiny pauses, because those are moments of stillness between the movements. So they tend to be very settling if the mind is willing to stay there, if the attention is willing to rest there. But also, if you stay with the pause, then you will just already intuitively catch the start of the next part of the breath. So cool, then you can maybe hang in there until you get to the end where the next pause started and see the whole length. So you see that it's a method. It's a method of just using the different parts of the breath to help your attention be willing to stay all along. And again, it's a practice. It's not that most people, I would say, even very, very, very experienced practitioners are not going to be able to sit down and, watch every part of every breath for 90 minutes. That is beyond the expectation, right? It's just a matter of learning, though, this kind of, for me, it's a matter of enjoying the rhythm of it. Finding the rhythm of it and then enjoying the rhythm of it. Oh, yes, okay. Just like ocean waves, just let it come and let it go. You know? And even that much is a beautiful practice. Even that much is a beautiful practice. Indeed, there's a little bit more here about the breath and about calming the body using the breath. The Buddha gives us this metaphor of somebody who is working with wood. And then he comes to this section that Bhikkhu Bodhi labels as the insight. And so he says, you contemplate the body, or you begin to observe and understand the body, internally, externally, both. You notice, and this is very important, the nature of arising and ceasing, right? You are showing yourself, training yourself that arising and ceasing are happening, and that it's okay to be with that. It's not only okay to be with that, it's actually going to teach you something profound. It may take a while. It may take a while. So some of you know my I have been at this for many, many, many years. And so I came up with this metaphor of the jelly beans. It must have been Easter time or something. I don't know exactly what happened with the jelly bean metaphor. But basically, you have a bag of jelly beans. You pick up jelly bean and you put it in your mouth. Doesn't matter the flavor. You pick your jelly beans, you eat your jelly bean, and there you have it in your mouth. Okay. Jelly bean, then it's done. You swallow, it's done. Right? Oh, it's done. Okay, next jelly bean. Right? This is what we're doing all the time. Next jelly bean, right? Trying to fill those gaps. But then eventually what happens is, if you observe long enough, the start and the end of sensation of jelly bean, then it becomes much less enticing. It's like, right, I put this jelly bean in my mouth and I know it's going to end in a minute. What's the big deal? This is how dispassion arises, right? This is how this kind of letting go of being so hooked by it arises. So it's beautiful. The Buddha says, even just with the breath, we can just start to train ourselves. Right. It's okay to be with endings. It's okay to be with things going away. That's an important lesson. You know? And you start with something very simple. Very simple with the breath. And then finally, this is my favorite part of the so-called insight sections that are between each of the practices. He says, or else, right? So first was contemplating the body internally, externally, and both, or else contemplating the arising and the vanishing and both, or else. So if all else fails, if none of those other things are your gig today, he says, mindfulness that, quote, there is a body, end quote, is simply established in the practitioner to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and basic mindfulness. Okay, so just as we did in the meditation, right? Just knowing that there is a body, just having enough attention to the fact that you can perceive a body is also a teaching. It's also a teaching. It's also helping you to understand the nature of what's happening. And just as with any other phenomena, we should be clear that there are many teachings about the insubstantiality of the body, or the conditionality of the body, or what we would call the emptiness of this phenomena. But we should not confuse that with it meaning that there isn't something that can be experienced. There is. There exists this thing that can be experienced, this set of phenomena called body. Mm. So I want to finish with a poem, which is a lovely poem that we keep on the fridge here at the vihara, that noisy fridge over there. And it's a poem by Lew Welch. Lew Welch was one of the said to be like one of the beat poets, so to speak, one of the folks, well-known folks in the Dharma scene and the poetry scene back in the 60s. I believe that he is the dad of Huey Lewis, actually. Oh. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that that's what I read about him. I'm not sure whether that's accurate or not, but details. And this is a beautiful poem in which he talks very specifically of what sounds to me like Buddhist practice. And we'll see how it goes. So Claudia, I think, has her copy there that she's going to help translate from. So I'll read it once, and then I'll tell you a little bit about reflection on it. So the poem is called I Saw Myself by Lew Welch. I saw myself, a ring of bone, in the clear stream of all of it, and vowed always to be open to it, that all of it might flow through. And then I heard, quote, a ring of bone, unquote, where ring is what a bell does. Do you understand? So he's saying, I saw myself a ring of bone. And in a way, we could take this both literally and metaphorically, right? He's talking about his spine, right? Our little vertebrae, a little ring of bone. Yeah? And metaphorically, he's saying, oh, I'm this thing, and things pass through this thing, right? And I vow to be open to that. But then he realizes, no, that's a mistake, because what is that? That is viewing this body as a solid, as a permanent, separate thing. So instead, toward the end, then he says, oh, no, but then I realized, right? Ring of bone, where ring, timbrar in Espanol, right? Ring is what a bell does, right? This thing. Our body is that thing, is that resonance, is that thing that is specifically resonating with all things, the sound passing through us, all the activity of the world that we experience passing through us, literally creating this effect of body that we see, that we can experience. So this is the truths. These are the truths that body is demonstrating for us. This being a beautiful resonance with everything that you touch and everything that touches you. Whether it's a bud or a flower, or the petals falling off. We're here for it, all of it. And that will wake you up. That will wake you up. Mhm. All right, folks, so I spoke a little bit longer than I was supposed to, I believe, but nonetheless, we do have a bit of time for some comments, questions, reflections, and on the meditation or on the talk, on the sutta. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, Hamza. Yes.
Really a quickie question, but you never know. That fully knowing, is that pretty much the same as sampanjana?
It is. Yes.
That's what I thought. Thank
Yep.
you.
Yes. Yes. Sampajanya, it's also called mindfully comprehending or full comprehension, fully knowing, fully understanding. It's related to that root jnana, which is knowing. All of the kind of knowing vows are also jhana is related to that form, I believe. Yeah. Other thoughts, other questions?
Yeah, what was the poem and what was the poet's name?
Yes, Chaya. It's the poem is called I Saw Myself, and the poet is Lew, L-E-W, Welch, L-E-W-E-L-C-H. Sorry, let me try that again. His last name is Welch, W-E-L-C-H.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And now people will be Googling Huey Lewis and Lew Welch to see if they actually, I think that's what I read, that they are related. Yeah. But in any event, it's a beautiful poem because I think he does a beautiful job of talking about this subtle shift in perspective, right? From thinking of yourself as this separate, independent thing, right, to something that's actually moving with or being moved by. Yes, Richard.
I thank you for your wonderful talk today. The story about the chamomile,
Mm.
I read that in your writings, and it was in a story. It was posted online. It was a story, and the thing about that, I carry that story with me a lot because it struck me. It's about beginner's mind. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, we know without thinking. We know without having to sit and dwell on something and analyze it. We know so much in our lives already that we just, it's like, it's a great example of beginner's mind.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right? Would you agree? You would agree.
Yes, I would definitely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Please pass it. Thank you.
So one of the things that occurred to me that you were talking about and other people have talked about in this change of perspective, and what I try to practice with, and I was practicing with it today with all the different noises that were going on in meditation, was and it's a powerful practice that I try and do often. And as I ask myself, is the noise coming to my ear or is my ear going out to the noise? And what I try and do is shift, because if my ear is going out to the noise, then I'm saying, I'm allowing the noise to interfere with my practice. But if I'm allowing the noise to come to my ear, I can just let it be, as you've been talking about, just let it be, and it will change. And especially with the practice of allowing it doesn't have just to be sounds, there can be sights or all the different sensations. It's the perspective of how one deals with it. And I find that when I practice that and I say, I'm going to allow the sound to come to my ear, then as what you were talking about, it can shift and one can notice the cessation of the sound or the changes of the sound. So it's a practice that I find to be very helpful.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that reflection. Yes, I definitely agree. And to me, it sounds like that shift into mindfulness, right? Because mindfulness is a receptivity of attention. And that shift into mindfulness just completely changes that dynamic and the quality of what you're receiving. Yeah, that's beautiful. I appreciate the reflection. And I want to also make the distinction or just add that, as we see in the 7 factors of awakening, which I'll talk about when we get to, it's part of the 4th foundation of mindfulness, we see that the first of the 7 factors is mindfulness, but the second factor is investigation. And investigation, it can feel very much like that going out. Oh, okay, then I go toward the object, or I compare this object to another object or another state. And that's also a useful thing if that's a practice you're intending to do, right? Rather than getting pulled by it, which is where you're saying, right? You get pulled out of some ability to be with. So beautiful, bringing out the subtleties there. Yes, Carolyn.
I just love that you're teaching this, and you can go on for as many weeks as you want. As far as I'm concerned, the more weeks, the better. It's so rich, and I so appreciate being reminded of just knowing that there is a body. Just knowing that there is a body. Because as I've been trying to practice mindfulness of body, I've been noticing, especially when I'm reading, like reading a novel, it's like there's no body. And then something happened. I come out of the novel and then, oh, body, here it is. So just that there is a body can just kind of, I don't notice when it goes away, but sometimes I can catch it coming back.
Sweet. Very interesting, right? That's attention or concentration, right? That's really the effect that's happening there, perhaps. Yeah. Wonderful. Yes, Brad.
So just to dovetail into that, often I practice as much as I can, just enough that there is a body. And what I notice is what the mind wants to do is freeze that into a conceptualization. Right? But if we can soften that, then even the perception there is a body, you see it as ungraspable, as like flickering. You can't hold a solid image of it for an instant. It's always like shimmer, which is a word that you use often, right? And I think it's like I was saying a week or so when you and I were chatting back and forth a little bit, that internally we can kind of blame ourselves for that. That if only my concentration were stronger, I could keep that. I could keep that object of meditation. I mean, we can keep a general object of meditation, but to expect each little individual phenomena to stay for any length of time
Right.
is another delusion, right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that so ties into the shimmer, right? That's why it feels like a shimmer, right? Because it's really just, if we really examine very closely what it is, even when you're trying to be aware of the entire body from head to toe, what you're doing is you're experiencing very small sensations here, there, and the other place, right? That's the way you know. That's the way you know. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Brad. Okay, I think that we have come to the end, and I think dear Dana is ready to make her announcement, her weekly
Yeah.
announcement here.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
The practice of giving and receiving has been a part of Buddhism since its inception. Giving to the Dassanaya Buddhist Community supports our guiding teacher, Dhammadīpā, the physical location at the vihara, and allows us to continue to offer Buddhist teachings in support of the awakening of all beings. Our support pages are on the website under the support tab, donate, volunteer, or offer materials. So thank you for all, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you for all you give.
Yes, thank you so much, Dana. And yes, thank you to everyone for making this a vibrant, beautiful community. So may the beneficial karmic momentum and results that we've set into motion here today, may they be a cause for our profound clarity and awakening to the truths of our lives. And may we and all beings be released from every form of suffering. By the power of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and each one's efforts, may all beings be free. Thanks, everyone.
Gracias, gracias, Clau.
Gracias, Claudia. And for folks here, we can stay